Right, welcome everybody to the June 23rd edition of Wednesday. Tonight I'm joined by Thomas from Tryon Distributing. My name is Zach. I'm the beer and wine coordinator for the Durham Co-op. My pronouns are he and him. Tonight we've got two really great wines. One from Lodi, California, called Sand Point. It's a Sauvignon Blanc. And we also have a old vine Grenache or Grenache, Barossa in Australia. Both are perfect for the summer, which is why Thomas and I kind of picked them out tonight. And we've got a bunch of cool pictures. I'm actually going to share some links in the chat tonight. So there's some like Google map images that if you want to watch on your own time, they're pretty cool just because it's people who have visited the winery and were able to out some pics. So anyway, Thomas, if you'd like to take it away, as usual, cheers everybody. We'll kind of jump right into the Sand Point Sauvignon Blanc. And as you're talking about some fun stuff, I'll be sharing, I'll start off with a sheet, which is a kind of common thing here on Wednesday. It's the insider view of what's in the bottle without really getting in to the glass. But luckily, we do not have to worry about that. No, take it away.
Yeah, so thanks, Zach. I'm Thomas from Tryon Distributing, live here in Durham. I actually grew up here in Durham too, which is rare these days. We're starting off this evening with Sand Point Sauvignon Blanc out of Lodi, as Zach mentioned. Family-owned winery, fourth generation, Brad and Randall Lange. They are twins. It is their family's project. Their grandparents began growing non-irrigated watermelons on the property back in the 1870s, which I thought was interesting. And they purchased their first vineyard in 1916, which is where Brad and Randall's dad actually kind of cut his teeth in agriculture, kind of got a bug for wine growing. And then obviously that's pretty terrible timing with Prohibition right on the heels of that. But they persevered through and continued to acquire some other properties. The River Ranch and the DeVries Road Ranch were purchased after that. And that's actually the River Ranch property is where Brad and Randall grew up. And it's where the Sand Point wines, the name comes from. Sand Point was this area down by the river in the back of their property where they spent a lot of their time in the summers, and they really fell in love with nature and just kind of got a bug for being out in nature. After they grew up and went to college, they came back and began working on the farm and got an even more appreciation for how important it is to sustain their land and the property, not just for the agriculture, but for the wildlife and the nature. And that's when they really dug their teeth into sustainability. And they actually kind of refurbished, restored all the land down there by the river. They revitalized the live oaks, and they planted some native bushes and made some duck. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Yes, I think the wood duck
wood duck nesting boxes. Yeah. So they kind of revitalized that whole area, made it nice. Their philosophy is that they want any animal to be able to cross through their property safely, which I think is a really cool baseline. Because some, like, obviously there's lots of vineyards where you don't want any pests or anything like that, and they kind of invite anything and everything to come in. They mention how they don't mind if the deer eat the vine shoots. Like, it's just a really, it's a very nice philosophy. They, as we're, mentioning sustainability, they first installed solar panels in 2004. They've been replacing all of their old farming equipment with more up-to-date equipment, and they're actually now kind of testing out electric farm equipment, which I think is cool. That's the first I had heard of that.
Yeah, me too. That's pretty. You can see a Tesla driving through the vineyards and harvesting the grapes.
That's got to be the way things are going, right? It's got to be. So very focused on sustainability. They have a female winemaker. Her name is Birmingham. Excuse me. She got her bachelor's of science in microbiology at Washington State and her master's in food science dedicated to wine fermentation, also at Washington State. And she worked for Woodbridge at Mondavi for a few years, kind of getting a sense for the industry. As so many people do, they work for a big winery at first, and then they get to go do the fun, cool project that they believe in. I certainly think this is probably one of those projects for her. And she started in 2008. And she takes a very old world approach, a very less is more, do more in the vineyard, less in the winery. The wine should speak for itself. This is a great picture of the twins actually at Sand Point, which is super cool. It's cool to you don't see too many wineries that are still family owned out in California these days. So
right. Yeah, I think to your point, like having kind of cutting your teeth at a really big, like high tech winery, and then being able to learn and use those techniques and then do kind of almost a passion project, but still being able to really produce super high quality wine. But for, these two dudes, instead of, the huge conglomerate that would be some of the big wineries. This is
you almost learn what you don't want to do.
Right. Yeah, the twins now that we're sharing. So little more hair behind the ears, I guess, is the term for that. But you can see like these are the two guys who are the owners of the winery, and it's neat, and I like both of these wines tonight. Focus on sustainability. If you can continue to grow, an agricultural crop like grapes, and then continue to do that with mindfulness, then we still get to enjoy these things versus just kind of using up the land and not really being able to, reap what we can in future generations. You said this is fourth generation or third generation?
So the twins are fourth generation. There's further generations alive and already involved.
That's great.
As you can see, they're not spring chickens anymore.
There you go.
But yeah, also to talk more about the sustainability, they were on the ground floor of helping to create the Lodi Rules program, which has become a sustainability program in that area that a lot of people have signed on to. A lot of their neighbors still have the same philosophies as them, and they kind of share some fruit as well in their winemaking process.
Yeah, it's really cool. So this is the Lodi wine map. The internet is full of very useful things. So if you ever are out in California and you want to visit some wineries, this is Lodi. So there's obviously quite a bit going on in the Lange Twins or Lange Twins. I'm not sure.
I wasn't actually sure either.
But they're like just right up north and are wanting to have folks come and visit them. It's really fun to visit a winery if you haven't, and then you get to really kind of get your feet on the soil. You can see the grapes being grown depending on what time of year it is. I also thought it's really neat that they kind of like, okay, the deer are going to eat some grapes, like that's fine. We still have plenty more to make really good wine. What does everybody think of the Sand Point Sauvignon Blanc? Good, yeah. I really, when I was tasting this, it reminded me of almost like green tea, like almost like matcha, and almost like kind of gooseberry, that green blueberry kind of fruit. It comes in a little paper husk. In North Carolina, we have ground cherries, which if you don't know what a ground cherry is, find it at the farmer's market. They're kind of like a sweet tomatillo. They have this little paper husk on them, and they're relative of gooseberry, which is just a really kind of fun, definitely summertime flavor, and really great still acidity. I think this would do quite well with some cheeses and fish and lighter kind of fare.
Or just on a patio.
Or yeah, on the patio, sure. There's also this kind of like melon undertone to it. So just really nice and summery. Now granted, gorgeous. It's like 75, 80 degrees versus what last week, which was 95 degrees. So this, I think, really gives that nice kind of crisp and easygoing patio sipper.
Yeah. I think as people The patterns that I've seen is people moving from Pinot Grigios over to Sauvignon Blancs more in this style, kind of skipping over the New Zealand styles. The people who love those will always love those. But I've seen a pattern of drinkers going from Pinot Grigio into this style of Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, and I can definitely see the similarities as far as like the weight on your palate, where it's not, I love New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, don't get me wrong, but it can be really nice and almost too zesty for some things, where in a glass by itself or with some richer food, I think it's perfect. It's one of my partner's favorite wines. It's kind of our, house fancy night wine is Frenzy Sauvignon Blanc, also from Thomas. So we're probably one of the bigger supporters of that brand at the store. But this, I think, for a kind of a first glass, last glass, you just want something a little lighter. This is pretty tasty stuff. Right. Does anybody have any questions about the?
Any questions about this one?
No. Go ahead, Ed.
Shoot.
I do, yeah. We've had both the Sauvignon Blanc that you mentioned from Marlborough, New Zealand, and then this. I don't really care for that. Aftertaste. So how is this different? They produce that when they grow it.
So it should, between the two, it should be a very similar process, as far as both are done entirely in stainless, and I don't think that either have any lees aging on them that I'm aware of. I'm pretty positive Frenzy does not, for sure, and I don't think this one does either. Just like any other crop, there are certain places with certain soil types and things that make it either difficult to grow something or make it unique to that area. And Marlborough, New Zealand just definitely has its own unique characteristic that is expressed very differently through Sauvignon Blanc than California or even in France and Sancerre or anywhere else that they grow, or Bordeaux as well, for example. I think it's a really environmental thing on that regard, because they're not really doing anything different to produce the wine.
Yeah, the whole concept of terroir. So the whole idea of like where it grows is kind of what it shows in the grape and the food world, or the crop growing world, if you will. For me, like what Thomas was saying, like for like New Zealand, especially Marlborough, produces really bold, grapefruity kind of flavors, really grassy, almost like on that kind of jalapeno, like green side of things, where this has a little bit of greenness, but it's not like in your face, bitter, grapefruity. It has more of that kind of mild, more lemony, citrusy flavors to it, versus Sancerre, which is kind of the big daddy of the Sauvignon Blanc world, where it's like really crisp, really like high tone acid, like friggin'
mineral.
Yeah, very
minerally.
Which this has a little bit of that. There's like kind of that salty, woodsy undertone to it, but it's not like just that really crisp. We do have a Sancerre from Tom as well on the shelf. If you do want to have a bottle and taste what we're talking about, it's the Roger Neveu. It's a pretty small producer, imported by Kermit Lynch. So really old school kind of master of wine, that if you see his name on the back label, it is going to be good stuff.
It has been hand-picked, hand-selected by a team of people from Kermit Lynch. They do a really good job of picking out some really unique small producers, all family producers in France and Italy. So yeah, definitely look for thif you're looking, if you need something, a guidepost.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But the back label can really help with picking out wines. That's something that you might see some flavor descriptors or something like that, but if you start to learn your importers and your distributors, then you can kind of get a feel of what their ethos is about what's in the bottle, much like the tech sheets that we share. So you can really kind of get hopefully a good idea of what's in it, or something you can trust when you don't really know, like there's 10 Sauvignon Blancs, like which one do I choose? There's some trusted folks that you can really kind of be on the lookout for, and it's going to be good. It might not be exactly what you were hoping for. for, because you might not be familiar with Sancerre or with New Zealand or whatnot, but it'll really kind of get an easy guide, a little cheat sheet that one more thing to look for when you're staring at all the pretty colors in the wine section.
Yeah. As many helpful factors as possible is always good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if I can get this to work, there is a little video that the Lange Twins did. Let's see here. And it's all about their sustainability. And that's a really big part of what they are doing.
They live there and they grew up there. Like, they really have this appreciation for, it being their land that they want to hand down for generations.
Right. So we'll see if this works. It's a minute long. I think we can all listen to some people talk about how much they love the land and the grapes that they grow.
You're trying to employ more sustainable vineyard practices and business practices.
Does it have audio?
It does.
I don't think the audio is working for me.
Okay.
Looked like it was on mute maybe for a second.
Let's see. Well, I will put the link for this in chat. I'm good with stills. I'm not very good with the video yet. And if you can't access the chat, then let me know and I will send it to you via email. Let's see.
It's also on their website. It's pretty easy to find if you
Cool.
go to the Lange Twins website and then go down to Sand Point. It's in that section.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, if nobody has any more questions about the Sauvignon Blanc, I think we can jump right into the Yalumba Red. Really great. New to the co-op for about 2 weeks now. Again, when Tom and I were sitting down talking about wines to kind of feature tonight, this out of the group really stood out to me. And I was really, really excited to have it on the shelves and obviously to feature it for Wines Day. So Thomas, if you'd like to tell us some cool facts about this, I'll go ahead and throw the tech sheet up.
Absolutely. So the cool story here. This winery was founded in 1849 by Samuel Smith, who you may know as the famous brewer in England. He was always looking to innovate and always looking to take on new adventures and new challenges. And so starting a winery in Australia seems like a pretty big challenge, but that's what he did. And they are still independent and family owned 6 generations later. The brewery in England is still family owned as well. They truly have built a huge legacy. So they started in Barossa, which is in South Australia, kind of near the coast. It's one of the premier wine regions in Australia. I heard someone relate it to Napa Valley to me one time. I haven't been there yet. I'd love to go. But so they really put their foot or their root down there. They built a clock tower for the town square and just really made a commitment to be there. The 3rd generation Smith, Fred Cayley, actually set off on a exploration venture to learn more about winemaking from places around the world, and came back with what began the basis for their sustainable progressive farming techniques that they have carried on for since then. They are the largest. They have the largest array of solar panels of any winery in Australia, which is pretty cool. They've won a bunch of awards, 43 accolades for their sustainable practices. For every hectare of vines, they have a hectare of native vegetation. Another pretty cool fact about them is that they own their own cooperage making facility, which is the only one in the Southern Hemisphere. And the winemaker for this wine, the chief winemaker is female. It's Louisa Rose, who started there in 1992. But the individual winemaker who crafts this wine, Kevin Glastonbury, is actually in charge of the cooperage. He gets to go and pick out the oak and then bring it back and make it into the barrels that they use, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize what goes into cooperage or a barrel making facility, and the fact that they own one is a huge deal. The fact that it's the only one in the Southern Hemisphere, I thought was pretty awesome. To think that half of the world they have the only one, that's pretty neat. And really, like, by controlling your own barrel making, you really have full control over how the grape juice, what you're putting it in, and you have handcrafted the vessel that you age it. I do have a picture of that, and their website is really great, with a lot of really cool pictures. Here's actually
a ton of history.
So this is Barossa Valley. So this is where they're located. Not too pretty, I mean, I guess it does okay as far as vineyards are concerned, but just glowing with the sunset there. Really pretty stuff. And then this is the cooperage. So this guy is marking a barrel right now, which usually you would have to go to Europe or America to buy your barrels. So the fact that they're kind of skipping that step also helps with their sustainability and their footprint. And then this is the clock tower that Thomas was referencing. Really kind of making their place known and also kind of giving back. They also, like Thomas was saying, really focused on sustainability. And I think the kind of theme tonight would be wine can be, affordable. It can be a little higher price point, but the winemaking team behind it really affects what ultimately ends up in the bottle.
Yeah, Kevin Glastonbury, who is the winemaker for this particular wine, joined the team in 1999, so he's been there for quite some time. And the chief winemaker, Louisa Rose, has been there since 1992. That was her first vintage, so it obviously is a great place to be and work, and they get to kind of do what they want to. This picture of the Tricentenary Vineyard, so one of the very first blocks in Barossa that they got first planted in 1889, and then I think replanted in, I guess, 1916. Some of the oldest Grenache in the world. As vines get older, they get the vines themselves get more robust, and you get smaller but more concentrated fruit. And to increase that, here they use very little irrigation, and so not all of the old vine Grenache that's in this wine comes from this vineyard, but this is part of their estate where it does come from. They have long-term neighbors and friends who also have very old vines as well, and they kind of share and blend a little bit. But on their property, this is the block that this wine comes from. It is also vegan friendly, and obviously we're talking about sustainability. It is certified sustainable, not just that I'm saying it is.
Yeah, and one thing we don't really talk about a whole lot is the fact that most larger scale wine is not vegan. It has to do with the fining product. So typically it is albumin from egg whites, and that kind of latches on to the particulate in the wine and the sediment, and then helps make a clearer glass of wine. Same thing with Guinness. There's the whole isinglass scandal, which is a fish bladder for fining agents. Most white table sugar isn't vegan due to what's called bone char. So there's this charcoal made out of animal bones that kind of sucks out the non-white color, if you will, and makes regular table sugar really stark white. So little things that you might not pay attention to. So if that's an important thing for your lifestyle choice, then Yalumba is very proud that they are using other fining resources, whether it's just really close-knit particulate screen, or I'm not sure.
I think it's a very fine filtering process that they use. Yeah. But yeah, to your point, some other non-vegan wines also use crushed bone
Oh, okay.
to fine as well. Obviously not Yalumba.
Right.
That is out there as well.
Yeah, and a lot of these folks also do a wild fermentation batch of wines. I don't know if Tryon has those or not.
There's a number of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the low intervention section at the co-op, it's wines that are just the naturally propagated yeast on the outside of the grape skins, and they're typically not fined or filtered if they're in that kind of thing, and especially in that section or in that group of low intervention. They're usually sustainable at the very least, if not all the way up to biodynamic, which is following the moon cycles to bearing cow horns and crystals and planting certain flowers at the certain time of day to really help the grapes kind of reach their potential. Get a little oddball depending, but usually the wine's pretty tasty. Everybody has their own kind of practice, if you will. So I think that the Yalumba is doing it right. I do have another, just so you can kind of get an idea. This is the map of Australia that Thomas was talking about. So Barossa, which is where we are right now, all the way down here in Southern Australia, where Sydney is more on like this side of things, where most people kind of think, and New South Wales and all of these other, bigger known wine areas. You don't typically hear a whole lot about Barossa, but really pretty great wines. And the fact that it's Grenache growing there, I think it's pretty awesome. You think of Syrah or Shiraz, you think of Cabernet when you think of Australia, but this is a really pretty wine.
Yeah, you see Grenache a lot in the GSM blends,
Right.
The Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre blends, and those tend to be a little heavier. So this is a really nice light expression that's really good for summer, a good substitution for a Pinot Noir. You can tell by the color that it is, it's very light and very easy drinking, but also, has some things going on there taste wise. It definitely lingers with you, which I've always been told is the mark of a good wine.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing quick about it, which is good. I also just shared another in the chat. If you click that link, it takes you to Google Maps, and that has a bunch of images from folks who have visited from all the world, and you can kind of see the take of what the property looks like. If you do want some extra, learning and pictographic fun stuff, that's a nice little link. Another kind of tip that if you're trying to discover about a winery, Google them and try to find their address and use that to your advantage to see like how they go about things, what the property looks like. And you can kind of get a feel of like the sense of place without necessarily having to fly to Australia, which would be great, but also kind of terrifying at the same time. I've heard it's a pretty long trip to get down there.
Yeah, then once you get there, to get to where you're going could be a really long time too.
Exactly.
Yeah, to speak a little bit more about the biodynamic stuff, you hear there's some crazy things that people do. I was reading about one of our Kermit Lynch wines where the winemaker uses indigenous yeast and all that stuff, and then also drives a tractor through the vineyard playing classical music like twice a week to make his vines happy. There's some very interesting practices out there.
Right. It's like talking to your houseplants to make sure that they're getting their energy, and kind of taking a step in whatever direction you want.
Yeah. You never know. If the wine turns out good, then whatever you did worked, right?
Right. If you want to play some music to them, go ahead. I'm more than happy to drink your wine if it's good.
Exactly. Any questions about this wine?
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
You said they marked the barrel, and I'm just curious, how much information do they put on the barrel? Is it date? Is it the type of wine? Is it the winery? What is it?
Usually they mark the lot, like which like which vineyard block things come from when it was put into the barrel. A lot of times wineries will age separate lots in different barrels for certain ages, and then they'll blend them together, even if it's the same grape. Say, for example, in this case, like juice from the Tri-Centenary vineyard might be aged separately from something that they got from one of their neighbors. And then they decide on how much they want from their vineyard block as opposed to their neighbor's vineyard block to make the final blend, even though it's all old vine Grenache. So that's, one example. There's also, when a lot of red blends are made, they do that with just different grapes, and they kind of wait and test each barrel to figure out when it's right to be blended with the other barrels that they have. So they should typically mark it by lot and also by varietal and by when it was first barreled.
Yeah,
Does that
they
answer
also
the question?
I think so. I also they mark what kind of oak it is, whether it's French or American or Slavonian or Hungarian. They also will mark toast level, so how much char they do to the inside, whether it's like 0, so no toast, or all the way to almost black and charcoal on the inside. You see that a lot with bourbon production as well. There's definitely some crossover. That's kind of the legacy of bourbon is they had their barrels, they got torched. They didn't want to throw them away because barrels are very expensive and hard to come by. They threw white corn liquor into the toasted barrel. It traveled down the Mississippi, and then magically you have this, wood and vanilla and oaky expression of, instead of just, basically moonshine, you have something a little more. So kind of learning what it is. And I think, Thomas, you're exactly right. They're marking dates, they're marking lots. If they have a single vineyard or a single row, they'll put that all into the same thing, depending on what the winemaker is trying to achieve. And, the more information you kind of scribble or burn or whatever it is on to the outside of the barrel, the more you can tell, hopefully, what you're going to get at the end. Using like popping the bung and using a wine thief and sampling it as you go along. That is definitely a thing that winemakers do every couple of days, depending on what their end goal is. And if you have 33% in a barrel and 66% in stainless steel, then you can still blend, and you can use a younger barrel with a little more character to it versus a used barrel for whatever kind of production you're doing. So they cram a whole bunch of information onto the outside just because that's what their job is. They're trying to make delicious wine.
Yep. So in this case, with this specific wine, it's a blend of French and Hungarian oak, and they age it for 7 months.
Mhm.
Zach, if I can follow up on this, doesn't seem to be quite as robust as some of the Grenaches that we've tried and you're familiar with. Does that from that particular area would make the difference?
Yes, I would say, like, if you're used to Grenache from California or from Spain, I think those are going to be a little heftier. There's some Grenache from Spain that's fairly light. California tends to make things a little more robust. But from my understanding, this is a very typical example of Australian Grenache. Typically, you don't see it by itself, and so you don't know that it's a little bit lighter because it's with Syrah and Mourvedre, and that really beefs it up a lot. But yeah, I would say any Grenache from California is definitely going to be more robust, and a lot of the ones from Spain are as well. And then you get the ones from the Rhone Valley that have more nuance. I'm not sure if it's nuance or pepper or whatever, but they seem to have some different characteristics going on as well.
Yeah, I think what
I might also add one comment. I'm surprised that more. Are you there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm surprised that more vineyards don't use music, because I've heard, I don't know, but I've heard that the plants really do respond. So
yeah, I've heard
I'm
that too.
kind of surprised that's not a normal thing.
Yeah, and maybe it will be moving forward. The particular vineyard that I'm thinking of makes some really amazing wine. So, maybe it's a matter of time before everyone's doing that. They just put speakers out there and turn them on.
make solar powered speakers
Right.
Yeah,
and
there you go.
constantly play whatever the vines are feeling.
Yeah.
To Thomas's point earlier, I definitely think this reminds me of Pinot Noir, or even Gamay. Like it just like really light bodied. It's a little fruity. It's got a little bit of tannin to it. It's just really tasty compared to like especially the Spanish ones that we have on the shelf that are big blackberry and more of that cooked fruit. This has a freshness to it, which again is why we chose it. Because I think for the summer it makes 100% sense.
Yeah, definitely goes a lot of the
This one-
same kind of things that a lighter red, like salmon and stuff like that.
Mhm.
This would be a good one to chill for the summer, as we've been talking about them, because it's light enough perhaps to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think you could easily put a little bit of chill on this and it would enhance it.
So if I could follow up with you, Thomas, when you're talking about the wine, your company is Tryon, is that Tryon? How do you pronounce that? Yeah.
Try on, yep.
How does a company like you pick and choose the wines that you will represent?
So we have some very basic parameters. We're a family-owned company, and we try to only work with family-owned breweries and wineries. I've yet to come across one. I don't want to say 100% because there may be one lurking out there, but every one that I've come across is family-owned. And we try to stick to the same kind of principles of sustainability as much as possible as well. So that's kind of, it seems like a no-brainer that the items that we have and that we pick up are kind of follow those philosophies. And that's really nice for me because I think that's the way things are going in general, especially in our area. I think with being a foodie town, that's more what people are looking for. So those would be the main things that I would say to that point. But we
So
also have like, go ahead.
A family owned, which you refer to, is that the same as an estate wine? And Zach, you're familiar with wine authorities, which supposedly just represent estate wines. Would that be a similar comparison?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I guess.
State winery typically refers to all of the grapes are from their property, kind of like with farmstead cheese. If cheese is made by the animals that are milked on the property, then they can call it farmstead. Kind of the similar idea with the state. There's a lot of rules with wine, but there are also a lot of blended things with wine. So it would, you'd have to have a specific what wine authorities is particularly talking about. But I would imagine that it's the people who grow the grapes are making the wine and then selling the wine to a broker or individually. But I would imagine that there's some kind of fuzziness that could happen.
Yeah, even with some of the Kermit Lynch stuff, it's not all estate, even though it's highly vetted and made by families on small properties. It's just like how things work in France. There's negotiants, and some people buy juice from other people and don't have enough land themselves to make it. But doesn't mean that the same care and and time and care.
Just like cooperatively grown wine.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like some big industrial farm. It's just, hey, I'm going to buy some grapes from my friend over here who I know is growing grapes the same way that I would. And we're just going to make the wine on my property where I have the facilities kind of thing. So yeah, that's been the kind of baseline. It was described to me as all of our partners, you can call and get someone on the phone, like, who to call and they'll answer and say, hey, whereas there's some big companies out there that you don't know who, you call and you get like the automated service. And
yeah, you get
that's kind of our philosophy.
Great. How do you folks think the Grenache is?
Yeah.
Good.
Nice. Yeah. Yay.
Awesome. So this is speaking of chillable reds, kind of a little segue. this would definitely do great 15, 20, 30 minutes in the fridge, kind of get it into that low 60s, if not even upper 50s, to make it really, very relaxingly drinkable when it's 80 degrees outside. We actually just got a program in the co-op this week that we're featuring reds that are in the same style, that are just nice and light bodied and can really actually benefit from a chill. So make sure you swing by, check those out. We might be adding one from Thomas here soon, if it does well. And yeah, if there's no more questions, I think this will wrap up this edition of Wine Stay. The next Wine Stay is 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I have one question which might be pretty simple. Why is it the understanding that if a red wine is a little heavier, that it should not be chilled, that you get the taste better and the robustness better if it's not chilled? Why don't we chill all red wines is the question.
Gotcha. I'm not exactly sure the answer to that technically. I think there's definitely a sweet spot for the bigger reds. Like, you don't want it to be hot, like you want to keep it in a cool place. But I think there's a different range of wines that maybe deserve a slight chill as opposed to just being a little bit below room temperature. As Zach mentioned earlier, Gamay, like Beaujolais, some Pinot Noirs, this Grenache is a great example as well. But I just think one thing that I definitely can speak to is that you get more flavor from things that are not cold. So some of those bigger reds, you don't want to be too chilled or else you won't get as many flavor. I'm sure it's with the esters or something like that. Maybe Zach might be able to speak to that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It also, it can kind of like dumb down or kind of mute the flavors some when things are too cold. And it also, for me, for really big bodied reds, if they're too cold, I only get the alcohol versus the actual flavors of the wine. I kind of have to hold it in my mouth and warm it up a little bit versus just being able to drink it. I think in America, and now that it's 2021, the average temperature in a household is much warmer than it used to be, or people actually had wine cellars that were always 56 or 58 degrees. And that is a more optimal drinking temperature. We don't typically refrigerate our reds in the States, but you could definitely get them into that like mid to low 60s. For most reds, handle that pretty well. For really light bodied things, getting them even into the probably high 40s would be okay. And you wouldn't really lose too much. It does kind of, you will start to mute some of the flavors, but that also helps to the refreshing quality. Cool and cold liquids are much more refreshing than something that's tepid or 75 degree water is not that refreshing, where ice cold water is refreshing because of that kind of, not the texture that temperature, but the fact that there is a different temperature like hitting your tongue versus something that's closer to body temp.
Yeah, and even for white wines, if they're too cold, you don't get any of the flavors. You have to kind of warm it up just a little bit to get all the aromas and everything to come out of it. So if that's maybe an example that you can kind of place over in the red wine category and be like, well, if white wine even can be too cold to not get the flavor, then some reds.
Yeah, it can kind of just show the acid or just show the alcohol versus the little nuances of the grapefruit, the pineapple, the grasses, all of the things that really you are kind of looking for when you're examining, smelling, and drinking wine. You can really kind of cover them up. Another kind of thing that benefits from temperature: cheese. Pull it out 15 minutes beforehand, and you get a lot more flavor. Because the fats and the minerals and the salts and all that kind of stuff have a chance to warm up and kind of move around. It's pretty drastic. If you take a slice of basic American cheddar, cold out of the fridge, it just kind of tastes like and a little bit of sharper acid. If you let that come up to temperature, you start to get those milky flavors. Or you can, almost taste the terroir of the cheese, if you will. So like it's New York cheddar versus Oregon cheddar versus Wisconsin cheddar. They all have little nuances, just like wine. I mean, that's one of the reasons they go so well together, is that they're both agricultural products. They're both fermented or preserved in some kind of way. And they have a temperature that they really succeed in. And do yourself a favor next time you have a piece of cheese and let it come to room temp for 15 minutes on the counter. Maybe have like a half a slice and tide yourself over while you're waiting. But the temperature can really affect what you're tasting.
Is that helpful?
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining. This wraps up the June 23rd edition of Wine State. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully everybody has some new favorites at the co-op. The Sand Point is in our New World white set and just in general white set right across from the beer cooler. And the Grenache is on the opposite side under some other great gems from Thomas that we've got represented. So everybody have a good night. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the next version of Wine State.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
I can't believe it. Cheers.
Thank
I can't believe
you.
it happened upon this. I was like, what? I was outside doing something.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.